Hope felt the fluorescent glare of the ICU lights sear her retinas as she sat vigil by Liam's bedside, his chest rising and falling in shallow, mechanical rhythm, each rasp of the ventilator a reminder that his life hung by the slimmest of threads. The beeping monitors tracked his heart's slow, steady fight against the darkness, and she had memorized each oscillation, each warble of the infusion pump, until the cacophony had become a twisted lullaby. She ran a trembling hand through Liam's damp curls, her wedding band glinting like a promise she feared she might not keep. Outside the curtained cubicle, footfalls echoed in the sterile corridor, first Carter Walton, his tailored navy suit crisp even beneath the weight of solemnity, stepping tentatively into the pale light. He closed the curtain with a soft click, his gaze moving from Liam's still form to Hope's tear-stained face. He cleared his throat, heart pounding as if he too lay gasping beneath the sterile glare. "Hope," he began, voice thick with conviction and something else, something fierce and tender. "I know this isn't the most conventional moment, but I've been thinking about Beth and her future and about the chaos that has swallowed our lives. I can protect her. I can give her the life she deserves, even if Liam," he swallowed, glancing at the drips that tethered Hope to this room of half-spoken prayers. "Even if Liam never wakes, I want to ask you, will you marry me, Hope? I want to be her father in every way. I want to keep her safe." His words fell like stones into a still pond, and Hope's breath caught in her throat. The weight of his proposal, tender in its intent yet ruthless in its timing, pressed upon her like a physical blow. Carter swept aside a loose strand of her hair, cupped her chin, and repeated, "Say yes, Hope. Let me protect your daughter, let me protect you." And in that instant, Hope's mind flashed back to all the half-lit nights she had held Beth in trembling arms, whispered lullabies to stave off nightmares, whispered vows to Liam that death would never steal him from her arms. She felt the pull of Carter's strength, the promise of safety in his unwavering focus on Beth's well-being, the solidity of his world undisturbed by the kind of dangers that had nearly claimed Liam. Yet, even as Carter's earnest plea wrapped around her heart, the curtain at the entrance swept aside again and Bill Spencer thundered in, his broad shoulders hunched beneath the sorrow of a father who had failed his son. His face was grim, eyes rimmed red. The reckless tycoon who could command empires now looked like a man undone by regret. "Hope," he said, voice bellowing through the antiseptic hush as he strode to her side, "I should have seen it coming. I should have protected Liam. I pushed him into that clinic to spite my enemies, and I let him walk into a trap." He dropped to one knee so that his gaze met hers at eye level. "I will never forgive myself. But I can beg your forgiveness, and I can ask you to stay with us. For Beth's sake, for my sake, for the Spencer name. Let us raise our daughter together, here, with the security that only this family can provide. Let her remain a Spencer." His plea was a raw confession of a father's broken promise, and he placed a trembling hand over Hope's. She felt his sorrow like an electric current, mournful and honest, and understood that his offer was more than wealth and power. It was a plea for redemption, a chance to rebuild for both of them. Outside, the corridor lights blinked, a distant reminder that time still marched on, indifferent to her anguish. Hope squeezed Bill's calloused hand, but her gaze flicked back to Liam, to the man whose labored breaths had once been the melody of her life. She thought of the wedding vows she had whispered at midnight, of the ring she had slid onto Liam's finger, and the promise of for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, she had sealed with a kiss. Now, in this crucible of heartbreak, she faced two pillars of refuge: Carter's steadfast love for Beth, a fortress against the world's dangers. Bill's penitent plea to restore the Spencer legacy by binding her to its name once more, and between them, the fragile form of her husband, teetering between life and death, a man whose only crime had been to stand up for what he believed in. She felt herself splitting in three, Hope the mother desperate to shield her daughter, Hope the woman still wed in her soul to Liam, and Hope the daughter-in-law torn by loyalty to a family that had failed them both. Her heart thundered as though it too lay tethered by tubes and wires, and in that moment, the world beyond the curtain fell away. Carter's eyes brimmed with hope and fear, Bill's with remorse and longing, and Liam's closed lids bore the promise of a tomorrow she could scarcely imagine. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the ache of choice, a dagger of love and duty twisting within her. Would she save her daughter with a man who stood ready to shield her, even if it meant turning away from her husband? Would she grant Bill the mercy of her presence, risking the deepening of ties that had already cost Liam so much? Or would she hold to the slender thread of hope that Liam might awaken and claim her heart anew, leaving both Carter and Bill to nurse their wounds in solitude? Hope's breath came in shallow sobs as she closed her eyes and listened only to the beeping monitors and the sound of her own heart, beating out an answer no one else could speak. Hope remained frozen for a stretched moment, her heart pounding so fiercely she thought it might burst, torn between two men who loved her and the comatose husband whose life she literally cradled in her hands. Carter's earnest plea still echoed in her ears. His promise to protect Beth with every fiber of his being, to offer stability and unwavering devotion even as her world trembled, and Bill's contrite offer, kneeling before her as a man undone by guilt, begging her to stay tethered to the Spencer name so that his granddaughter would never know abandonment at the hands of her mother's family. All around her, the sterile hum of machines offered no counsel, only a ceaseless reminder that Liam's fate lay hidden behind closed eyelids and cranial swelling. She glanced down at Liam's face, so pale beneath the fluorescent glare, and felt every whispered word she had ever uttered to him of love, of faith, of future, stitching themselves into a tapestry of memory that begged her not to abandon him now, when he needed her most. Gently withdrawing her hand from Bill's trembling grip, she placed it across Liam's chest, feeling the familiar thrum of his heartbeat beneath her palm. Standing, she turned toward Carter, whose handsome face was etched with hope and fear in equal measure, and lifted a trembling finger to her lips before speaking in a voice so low that even the monitors stilled in anticipation. "I can't," she said simply, and the single syllable carried the weight of every breath she had stolen in prayer these past endless hours. Carter's shoulders sagged as his brilliant eyes shimmered with the threat of tears. He nodded, swallowing past the lump in his throat, and reached out to tuck a stray curl behind her ear, an almost fatherly gesture that broke her heart all over again. And then, as if by silent agreement, he permitted the curtain between them to fall, giving her back to the vigil at his friend's bedside. Bill watched in stunned silence as Carter slipped away, and when the curtain closed, he reached out to clasp Hope's hand again, though she barely felt the contact, so lost she was in the sacred grove of her heart. That night, Hope hardly slept. She sat in a stiff plastic chair, draped in a lavender cardigan borrowed from a sympathetic nurse, her gaze never leaving Liam's form. The hospital corridor beyond the sliding glass doors pulsed with the muffled tread of night shift staff, the distant clang of supply carts, the occasional laugh in the staff lounge that made her chest tighten with envy. Every so often she whispered to Liam, reading him lines from old love letters she had written in happier times, recounting the day they first met, the moment he had slipped that slender gold band onto her finger beneath a sky painted with fireworks. With each recollection, she poured into his dreams the warmth of their life together, willful conviction that he would open his eyes and find her there. And in the small hours before dawn, she sensed a shift. A soft stir in his fingers, a delicate arch of his brow, so slight that any other bedside vigil might have missed it, but she, ever attuned, held her breath. A silent countdown began, first a tremor in his lips, then a gentle sigh, then the flutter of lashes that revealed for a single heartbeat the bright blue eyes that had once gazed into hers and made her world expand. When Liam truly awakened, it was as if the universe exhaled in relief. The world's color brightened in that moment, the sterile walls of the ICU softened, the blinking lights of the monitors conspired to play a triumphant melody of bleeps and bloops. Hope's eyes filled with tears as she leaned over and whispered, "You're back, Liam. You're safe." "I'm here." His gaze came into focus, tentative at first, clouded by pain and confusion, but his recognition flared like a sunrise. "Hope," he croaked, throat raw. When she nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks, his lips curved into a weak but unmistakable smile, and he reached for her hand with surprising strength. The moment the bubbles of joy erupted within her chest, Hope knew that any decision she had made through tears and heartache paled before this single truth. Her vows had bound her to this man, through sickness and in health, for richer, for poorer, and nothing could sever that bond, neither grief nor guilt nor the well-meaning offers of others. As Dr. Bridget Forrester entered to adjust his medication, she paused at the bedside, astonished to see Liam conscious and fluent after hours of sedation. Hope straightened, brushing stray strands of hair from her face, and greeted her with a trembling but radiant, "He's awake." Bridget's professional mask slid into place as she checked his vital signs, then looked to Hope with relief shining in her eyes. "He's stable," she said softly, "but no visitors except immediate family. His wounds are healing well, and there's no trace of that phantom tumor. He'll need physical therapy to regain strength, but I expect a full recovery." The news was a benediction. Liam squeezed Hope's hand, and in that small gesture lay more promise than any ring or vow uttered in an empty corridor. Word of Liam's awakening spread swiftly. Carter returned later that morning, carrying a single stalk of white lily, the same flower Hope had whispered her wedding vows over. Placing it gently in a vase by the bedside, he nodded to Hope and Liam in respectful silence, his expression a mixture of sorrow and acceptance. Hope gave him a small, grateful nod, sealing without words the understanding that his offer, as tender as it had been, belonged to the time when Liam's fate still hung in the balance, a chapter that had closed with Liam's return to consciousness. Carter departed soon after, leaving behind only the lily and a vow that he would always be there for Hope and Beth, whether as friend or co-parent, never again as suitor during moments of crisis. Then Bill arrived, his typically brash stride tempered into something softer, more vulnerable. He pulled a chair beside Hope, resting his calloused hand over Liam's in a gesture both paternal and fraternal to his son. Tears glistened at the corners of his eyes as he looked at Liam. "Son," he whispered, his voice thick, "I failed you. I put you in harm's way to serve my pride, and for that I can never forgive myself." Liam's gaze sharpened, his voice still rough but determined. "Dad," he rasped, "I survived. That's what matters." Bill nodded, swallowing back the agony of his conscience. He turned to Hope and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry for everything. You never should have faced this alone. If you'll have me, I want to be a better father, a better man, and the Spencer you and Liam can rely on." Hope met his gaze, and in his remorse she saw a man reborn by suffering, one who would guard his family fiercely now that he had glimpsed how close he had come to losing them. Over the following days, the trio Hope, Liam, and Bill began to rebuild the delicate scaffolding of their lives. Liam underwent gentle physical therapy sessions in a sunlit room overlooking a courtyard garden, where he relearned to lift his arms and steady his gait. Hope guided him through each exercise with a mix of gentle encouragement and teasing jabs that revived the spark of their courtship. "If you don't straighten that leg, I'll send Beth to remind you," she joked, and his laughter, weak though it was, filled the room with a promise of better days. Bill watched from the sidelines, a protective presence who never intruded but stood ready to intervene if needed, offering to fix Liam's favorite comfort foods or bring in a specialist at the slightest sign of complication. Beth, ignorant of the full drama that had swirled around her family, visited each day with a drawing in hand, a depiction of her daddy strong and happy, a rainbow overhead and hearts floating above. Hope pinned the picture to the bulletin board and told Liam, "She thinks you're a superhero." He kissed her forehead and replied, "I am, when I have you both by my side." And in that moment the tensions between mother, father, and grandfather dissolved into a unity forged by crisis and sustained by love. As Liam's strength returned and he prepared for discharge, Hope and Bill walked the hospital's tiled corridor together one last time. Bill paused by a polished window, looking out at the bustling city below. "I know I asked you to stay for Beth," he said quietly, "and I still want you and her under my roof, part of the Spencer legacy. But more than that, I want our family whole." Hope turned to him, feeling the weight of her choices finally settle into clarity. "We call the shots now," she said, her voice firm yet gentle. "We'll be together as long as it serves Liam's recovery and Beth's stability. But it has to be on our terms, no ultimatums, no power plays. Just love, honesty, and respect." Bill smiled, a tear sliding down his cheek. "You have my word." When they reached Liam's room, Hope slipped inside to find him packing a small overnight bag, eager for home, but already nostalgic for the sanctuary of survival. He grinned at her and Bill, the three of them forming an unlikely trinity of second chances. Hope lifted Liam's hand to her lips, no words were necessary. And Bill placed a supportive hand on her other shoulder. In the soft light of that hospital room, they stood together, the broken pieces of their past realigned into a new mosaic of family. The road ahead would not be free of obstacles, legal battles over the misdiagnosis, the fallout of Liam's shooting, the long process of healing, but they had weathered the storm's eye and emerged bound by a deeper understanding of what truly mattered. As they stepped into the elevator, Hope pressing the button for the ground floor, she felt the first stirrings of hope beyond mere survival, a hope that love, tested by fire and shadow, could indeed endure, and that together they would write the next chapter of their lives with courage, forgiveness, and the fierce resolve to cherish every heartbeat they shared.